Hi, and welcome
Hold
to
on. Here we go.
hi,
Sorry.
and welcome to another exciting pirate news. With me, we have the one and only Malt, our fearless leader, Captain Jamie, and
Ahoy.
and of course the one and only Steve.
Arr.
So let's dig right into probably the worst out of everything we have to talk about tonight, which is the failed vaccine rollout, and just what a slap in the face Massachusetts has done. I mean, I understand their logic behind it, but we need to get those out.
Like, if we're going to talk about the logic, there's really only one logic behind this, and it is designed to be as genocidal a system as possible. It's poorly implemented. It's only available online. The vaccines are really only being distributed in like high income white areas or for profit health centers. Um, Baker needs to face criminal charges.
Jamie, Steve, any thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, not being in a high risk group and, having the luxury of working at a job where I can, do all my work from home. Um, I'm in the position where, well, the pandemic is a bit of an inconvenience, but it's really not it's, it is not a pain point for me. I'm very fortunate in that regard. So, I mean, from my perspective, I've just been, okay, yeah, we're doing a vaccine rollout. I'm not even gonna pay attention to it in about June. And in June, I'll be like the groundhog that sticks his head up and says, "Can I get one yet, or do I need to go back in my hole for 6 weeks?" But yeah, I mean, the logistics of it are to me are mind blowing. You know, Massachusetts has what, 6 million people. So depending on the manufacturer, you've got 1 to 2 doses each. So 12 million doses. Trying to do the logistics out of that. I would expect a couple of face plants, and based on what Malt said, yeah, I guess there have been a couple of face plants.
I mean, they are not vaccinating teachers right away, but they're about to send all the kids back to school. Like,
For like 4 weeks. Like, they're not going to be there in school for a full term. It's such a suicidal, utterly suicidal push to get those kids back in school. Like, the kids know what's going on. They know that the parents and their teachers are attempting to put them back in schools when it's not safe. Like, the kids are going to remember that the parents in their lives risked their lives for nothing.
Well, I mean, it's the administrators. I think many teachers don't necessarily want to go back
Sure.
immediately. So, and I can understand parents wanting to. I've got a son in high school, but it's not clear to me from some of the stuff that I've seen that it will really be safe. I remember there was one case where they shut down, I think it was in Florida, where it was a natural experiment where they had to shut all the schools down. And then they had schools that were remote and schools that weren't remote when they brought them back. And there was a surge in cases just from that. And if you compared cities and towns where the kids were remote versus where the kids were in class, it was really night and day.
It's like, we can't stress hard enough how, like, I cannot use language strong enough to express the condemnation I have for the administrators in charge here. The schools don't have enough money in a non-plague year. Now
Yeah,
they're just
yeah.
like, we've given teachers no support. Like, I've been an online tutor for about a decade. It sucks. And it takes longer than teaching in a classroom to get good at it. And to suddenly expect teachers to have to perform for so many hours. Sorry, I'm ranting.
or
But
even the parents who have no experience in education trying to keep their kids under wraps whilst doing a job. And for those who have special needs students, oh my stars, even worse.
Like it should have been city by city. We should have taken the public access television and systems a lot of cities have, and also radios, and just like not have forced it to be an atomized system. Just pause the schools for a year. Whatever kids can pick up in the interim, great. If they don't, fine. Staying alive should have been the priority, but it wasn't. This forced fake normalcy where we have this idea that like masks mean we can live our normal lives as long as we wear masks and stay separate and like wash our hands all the time, which was never the case. We weren't ever going to be able to have a semblance of normalcy as long as this was around. And now we are dealing with a more contagious variety. Like at the start, the virus was only spread by droplets, but it has evolved to be airborne now. Like double to triple masking is the norm. Like fitted KN95 masks are the norm now, and that's just not going to happen at all in any classroom of any size.
I mean, as far as making it mandatory for the parents having to make sure that their kids do all the work and holding it thumb screws to the parents, just like Malt is saying, putting so much pressure on the teachers to adapt onto a whole new environment just isn't fair to the teachers, isn't fair to the kids. If you're looking for an institutional change, fine, start implementing it, but just putting straight demands that kids have to do something that they've never done before, everybody's having to do this whole new system, you got to have some leeway.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Steve.
I was going to say, even for, I have done remote work off and on for years. Years and years. And even so, as someone who's used to it, who understands, like the pros and cons and the pitfalls and, that sort of thing. One thing that never ceases to amaze me is that when you work remotely, stuff just takes longer. It always takes more time. And, that is, to me, that's one of the things that I don't know to the extent to which that's been considered in remote education, but, just basically you work remotely, just add an hour a day at least.
Yeah. That's...
Well, for some people, that's a commute, right? So they save on commutes.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that this whole thing is going to change the way that work is done from this point forward. So many jobs that... Sorry, go ahead, Malt.
I was going to say, I have heard that. I think we're going to see the opposite. Like, I think as soon as it's feasible, everyone will have traumatic associations with distance working or distance education. I know that's what like a lot of the big business publications are talking about. Like, oh, we don't have to have offices anymore. I think we're probably going to go back harder to offices than we were before. I don't see a lot of positive social progress coming out of this. I think kids are going to come away from this associating distance education with this level of isolation, mm-hmm. when it doesn't necessarily have to be that.
There is a silver lining to this. If that's the case, Uber is not going to get as much out of their drivers anymore. Which, speaking of which, isn't that like a issue going on right now with the Ubercheats and censorship?
That transition.
Well, then we can start with the UK.
Yeah, it was a little. Steve,
do you want to talk about the UK? Yeah. What happened in the UK?
No, this is an interesting thing. So with respect to a lot of gig economy companies like Uber, they've always maintained that the people, the drivers, the people doing the actual work are not employees. They're just contractors who work on their own schedule, decide how they do their job, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Uber drivers are fairly tied to the way Uber, does pricing, um, et cetera, et cetera. But to make a long story short, they were challenged in the UK, and the UK's High Court decided that, well, Uber, you actually are an employer, and you're going to have to, at least the seven or so plaintiffs named in the case are going to have to be considered employees. Now, what about the other UK drivers? Well, they will have to take it up with the, I guess their equivalent of the National Labor Board. But, it does, their high court has set a precedent. So it will be interesting it'll be one of those things to watch and, to see if it has an influence on the way things are in other countries like here.
Yeah. So essentially, what's going on? Going more with that, or what I heard about was that Ubercheats getting shut down too. What is Ubercheats?
So Uber Eats.
No, Ubercheats.
Sorry, the background to this is Uber Eats has a bug. They call it a bug. I think it's a deliberate choice to measure distance based on what it looks like on a map instead of what the actual terrain is. So, it doesn't count elevation in cities like San Francisco, which is 60% elevation. So someone rolled out this Chrome plugin called Ubercheats, and what Ubercheats does is you set in your employee information, and it calculates how much the app has stiffed you by using this inaccurate, deliberately inaccurate way of counting distance. And it was up for several months. I think the PC World article said it was up for 6 months, but Uber Eats issued a copyright complaint alleging that people would consider, would think that this was endorsed by Uber Eats. And it's going to get pulled off of the Chrome web store as of tomorrow. So if you're watching this and you work for Uber Eats, go get it while you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case of trademark going wild, being used to actually silence a useful app that Uber drivers can use. The thing I heard was that it was literally they calculated by straight shot as if we were all flying in our private jets to be able to go there straight from point A to point B, not, turn right here, turn left there, go around this way, go into this rotary. That doesn't enter into their calculations. It's my understanding.
Oh, so they weren't even looking at the street distance. It wasn't even this. Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, you look in Google and they don't give you elevation, but it's literally it's not. It's calculated from point A to point B as one line, as opposed to here is the point. Here is the path you would have to take along the actual streets to get there. So I was assuming that they were using the same route finding software that Uber uses to calculate driving rates. So that is insane.
Hey, it's computationally a lot easier if I just go from point A at XY to B point at XYB and just draw a line.
So that's
a lot easier.
That means at some point there was a meeting where it was decided that instead of just piggybacking on the system they already have for calculating distance, they will make a secondary system that calculates distance worse.
Hey, think about it this way from a software perspective. It's decreasing the time it takes to make that calculation. And when you have to pay for all those calculations on your AWS cluster, that's just the way it is.
Malt, have you ever seen the movie? Have you ever seen the Yes Men documentary?
Oh God.
Well, you know how humor is often inspired by real life. So I kind of suspect that there's some real life stuff of that nature that's gone on.
That kind of reminds
Just a
me of
speculation, wild speculation.
reminds me back in the day versus dumb sales guy versus IT guy. It was pretty good. It was back in the original Halo days. But if you haven't ever seen it, definitely look it up. But the last story.
I'm not done being upset about this. I'm sorry. Just one more thing. Uber
Yeah.
Eats is literally just Uber, but your passenger is food. It's the same thing.
Well, just thinking a little bit, thinking about this a little bit. If you're transporting people and you're paying them by distance, it would make sense to do an accurate distance calculation and include things like terrain elements so that you charge the fair price of the trip for some definition of fair. Now, with what's different about food that would provide an incentive to shortchange that calculation?
The fact that there's no profit margin on most restaurants. It's like there is no rational explanation that does not put Uber knowingly at fault here.
I think that was the whole point of why that's such a sacrilege of what they're doing with the copyright.
Mhm.
And why we need to make as many people aware of this so that it can get fixed. And that being said, there was
Sorry,
more
just
drama.
to say that's trademark. They didn't use copyright.
A trademark. I mean,
It's like the three trifectas of international privilege, of intellectual privilege. It's copyright, patents, and trademark.
yes.
Oh, and I guess there's what is it? Something that what is it?
Proprietary information.
No, I wasn't thinking that. I mean, there's the rich movie stars get to claim personality rights as well. That's not federal, thankfully, just states.
I wonder how eccentric I'd have to get to be able to invoke that.
Though, you know what's really funny? Did you hear
Make a movie?
Did you hear about the guy from Futurama, the guy who does the voice for Zach Brannigan? He does all the Trump tweets, but with Zach Brannigan's voice, and it's actually hilarious.
There are no more Trump tweets. Like,
yeah, but they're archived at Library of Congress, right?
Unfortunately.
Speaking at CPAC this year, he's the guest of honor at CPAC. Donald fucking Trump.
And speaking of other horrible things going on, Facebook and News Corp is the last story we got for you tonight, which is even more of a oi. I know a lot less about this story. Could somebody else lead us in on this one?
I'll
go for it.
I'll start, and I know a little bit about it. And Jamie, you can fill in the blanks that I leave. So there's been sort of a hubbub going on in Australia about news organizations and the traffic that large internet providers is allegedly taking away from them. So in this case, I believe it was News Corp in Australia, and they were unhappy about companies like Facebook, etc. They didn't like having their stories shared on social media sites. So they complained to their representative. Maybe if you're head of a big company, your representatives actually listen a little more. But anyway, what Australia ended up doing is enacting a law that required companies, social media sites to negotiate payments with news companies, to share in order to link their content. And Facebook was decidedly against this, so they attempted to basically shut down news sites for all of their subscriber base in Australia. And I gather they did it with a rather heavy hand, because it wasn't just news sites that went down. It was like local government sites, public health, the Public Health Bureau, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of like this is turning into News Corp versus Facebook, in a sense. I don't know, Jamie, can you want to? Would you like to add to that?
So, I mean, we've got a situation where Google and Facebook are basically the ad duopoly. And you look at Australia and it's, you've got a small number of news players, many of them owned by Rupert Murdoch. And so, we have, and we'll link to Cory Doctorow does a good overview of what's involved and so one of the things that we have is is ad revenue, and how Google and Facebook would be using the ad revenue, using the links and the data that would leak out from these ads as a way of getting information on the news companies to negotiate better rates. And so one aspect of this, according to Dr. O, is that now it's kind of, if you think of Google and Facebook as the employer and the news organizations as the employees, now they can do kind of better collective bargaining between what those rates are going to be. And that's good, although the government gets to decide who's a news organization and who isn't. So, if you're if you have your own small little site, probably you're not going to get any help in regards to that. But if you're a big player like, News Corp, then, you'll get listened to a lot. But ultimately, we've got two cartels on both ends, and we've seen it in the U.S. where you've got Clearwater has so many radio stations, and
Clear Channel.
Clear Channel, thank you, Clear
and the
Channel.
Sinclair Group.
Absolutely, and or how many newspapers have been bought up by different media conglomerates, and so you've got Facebook and Google on one end, and you've got a small number of news organizations. And so we really need to A, get a different model because advertising sucks, and B, break up these organizations so they just don't have the market power that they have.
Well, one of the one little technical note. The Clear Channel, which has been, historically an accumulator ever since the FCC loosened up market share rules back in the 90s or whenever. They're now called iHeartRadio. So if you hear your radio station, talking about iHeartRadio, well, then, that is actually Clear Channel.
The voice of Satan.
For low values of Satan.
I would say Satan's younger, more chill hip hop.
One of the newer Clear Channel or iHeartRadio stations in the Boston market, where I'm located, is actually a station called WBZ. It's one of the oldest. It's one of the very early AM broadcasting stations in the country. Originally, it was owned by Westinghouse. Then it became part of CBS, along with a sister station, WBZ Television. And now there are, I guess, with the radio station got sold off to iHeartRadio. And for the first time in WBZ's history, the radio and TV stations, despite having the same call letters, are owned by two completely different companies.
Fun.
You know what? We should just
two different giant companies.
No, what we should do? We should just get a giant camera and follow Malt around and have him just declare what's a good idea and what's a bad idea. You know what grinds Malt's gears?
I am glad you at least recognize what I have always known. So thank you for that.
You know, if I was going to say, if Worcester ever gets a public access station,
They have one.
oh,
They also have multiple public access radio stations, of which I am not allowed to have my own show.
Oh.
We should fix that.
Speaking of
I
Worcester, there's some news from Worcester before we go. Facial recognition.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a backstory going on here. Right now, the city manager is attempting to negotiate with the police union, and the police union is playing hardball with their stupid new Polar Park. Specifically, the union chief is threatening that the cops are going to picket Polar Park when it opens. Which
What's Polar Park for those of us who don't know?
are there
Polar
bears?
Park is I wish. It's the most expensive minor league baseball stadium in history, and it doesn't even exist yet.
Oh, that's the Red Sox move from Providence to Worcester. Okay. I didn't know his name Polar Park. Okay.
People call them Red Sox. It's the minor league team. So this
Right,
is not
right. It's the
Red Sox.
Paw Sox.
Yeah.
What used to do the Paw Sox, yeah.
The
Playing
Pawtucket.
against us up here in Lowell with the Spinners.
Yeah, so that's if that project fails, the city will go bankrupt. So obviously the police are using that for leverage because they're amoral psychopaths. So I'm mostly convinced the city manager's pledge to remove police officers from schools is a push against the police union, because the shifts in schools are easy, and you basically like free money for the police department. There's also a ban against facial recognition cameras. I think that is like a juke because the police are also trying to get ShotSpotter Connect, the predictive policing algorithm paid for, which requires an additional $250,000 to upgrade the ShotSpotter system we already have. So it's like, we're not going to do this racist thing because we're doing this other racist thing instead. And like we're not doing this racist thing is the only thing the media is talking about. Like this push to get more police predictive AI has not really been covered by the big newspapers in Worcester, because they are in the pocket of the city government. Which I'd also like to remind everyone that the Worcester city manager is a COVID survivor. He, despite being able to work from home, chose to continue going into the office. So, like, good work.
You know, just out of curiosity, what is Worcester's local newspaper, and are they owned by Gatehouse Media?
We've got the Telegram and Gazette for the newspaper, and then there's the WOMAG Worcester magazine, which is like a lifestyle periodical, but mostly just restaurant ads. And I don't know, but I assume yes.
Just Gatehouse is another large, company that's acquired lots of local newspapers over the years, and they own our local newspaper. And I was wondering if they owned yours too.
Yeah, the Telegram and Gazette used to be owned by the Boston Globe, which then got bought by New York Times, and then I think the Globe was spun out, and I thought the Times spun out the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, but
Gatehouse does. Yes, Gatehouse owns Telegram and Gazette, and the Gatehouse Media also own New Media Investment Group, the parent company of Gatehouse Media. In 2018, purchased Holden Landmark Company, which owns Holden Landmark, Worcester Magazine, and several other weeklies in central Massachusetts. So yeah, these are both owned by Gatehouse. Swell, super. And my baby has wandered into the office.
And with that said, if you could like, subscribe, and share, we'll love you all the more.
Run for office. We'll endorse you.
As long as you're not a fascist.
The more the merrier. And if you are, at least your bad ideas will come out to light.
There is that.
Slim comfort that.
But that being said, yes, definitely like, subscribe. I think we talked on some really important things tonight, and the reason why the fight needs to continue to go on. So thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing and comments. Anything you have to share with us, we always appreciate. Oh, angry baby, angry pirate baby.
Good night, folks.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye. Good night. Done.